This is Inside Scoop Virginia. I'm Bettina Lawton, and I am here with Senator Janet Howell. She is getting ready to go down to Richmond for another session of the General Assembly. And we're going to talk with Janet about what she thinks is going to happen. There's been lots of changes and controversy in the Virginia Senate this past year, and we'll talk a bit about some bills that she's also looking at. So welcome, Janet. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Bettina. I love being on your show.
Well, let's talk about the state of the Senate, because for those of us on the outside reading about what happened, particularly last June with Senator Puckett, although I see now the federal people have said they're not going to bring any kind of case against him for what happened with his resignation. You've got a tobacco commission that everything I see looks totally out of control. What is going on in the Senate? It's now in Republican control.
It is in Republican control, but we're fairly confident that's temporary, that we'll take it back in November. There was a lot of skullduggery that went on with Senator Puckett. It was really unfortunate. It changed the dynamics of the whole state political system and what we're able to accomplish in Richmond. Unfortunately, there were no indictments, but it has totally changed things. It has, as you mentioned, revealed sort of the latent corruption that surrounds the Tobacco Commission. They have a large amount of money. I think it's about $500 million at their disposal. And it seems to be run by politics, and it seems to be pretty much just a slush fund for certain delegates and senators from that area.
It certainly does. It's sort of like if you're a friend of a certain unnamed delegate or senator, you can get millions of dollars for projects that, at least as I read them in the paper, and of course there may be more to it, they don't seem to be particularly well thought out or particularly useful. And it's a lot of money that we got, I think, as a result of the tobacco settlement that should be going for better purposes and helping the farmers who are no longer growing tobacco and helping people, affected by tobacco.
One of the things that happened about 3 years ago, JLARC, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission that I'm a member of, did an in-depth study of the Tobacco Commission and came up with a couple dozen proposals to get some kind of control on it, and virtually none have been implemented. So this is one area we have got to look at. I frankly don't see why that area of the state should have all of the money going there when our area is also suffering. Mm-hmm. Why would that be?
I guess it has to do with who the delegate is who's running the show, right? Well, now the Republicans have taken over again. So what effect has that actually had on how the Senate's going to be run? We still have Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam, so we only need to get one seat back to take control again in November. But as a practical matter, you've got a session to do before that can happen. So what do you think will happen this session?
The biggest change, the most significant change, in my opinion, is what's happened to the committees. Senior Democrats have been thrown off of significant committees. Our more junior members have been deprived of some seats. They have fewer seats than they should. Oddly, I was unscathed. It doesn't seem to matter who's in charge. I have the same committees. But I'm really the exception. I think there are only 2 or 3 of us that didn't have committees taken away. And we have had very senior members thrown off of committees they've served on for years. And that is not the way we've done it in Virginia in the past. If you're on a committee, you don't get removed unless you want to be. You give permission. Or somehow the numbers work that we just can't squeeze in that number for each party. But what they've done is just take control of committees. For example, Finance Committee, the most significant committee, only has 5 Democrats out of 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought the committees were supposed to be proportional. So if you have 15, they should have 8, we should have 7.
That's what it should have been.
Wow. So is this more of the destruction of the famous Virginia way? I mean, you always hear about this, which I'm always highly skeptical of, I must tell you, but this notion of fair play, that that's supposedly how we do things. This seems to just be a further step away to sort of a more cutthroat
Yeah,
type
it
of political
definitely
system.
is, and it's not perceived by the public as that significant, but I've got to tell you it is. I've been in the Senate now. This is my 24th session in the Senate. And when I started, it was 2218. We were in the majority. People were not taken off of committees. There was a collegiality that is not totally lacking. I mean, there are some friendships across party lines, but it's deteriorating rapidly. And when we were in control very briefly last year, we actually put out an olive branch to the Republicans by not doing to them what they had done to us. And then when they took over, they did it again.
Well, you know, I
So
gotta
it's
tell you,
very difficult.
I sometimes wonder just how naive the Democrats are, because I remember when that happened, and I thought to myself, you know, yes, it's the high road, but don't think that it's going to help. If we lose control, they'll do it again. And I sometimes do think about Democrats. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
It just is
Yeah.
amazing. But I think the committee assignments, as you say, are so important because so many bills just die in committee. And as I recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, the committee votes are not recorded.
In the Senate, they are.
They are. Okay.
They are in the Senate. It's the House that doesn't record subcommittees.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at least if there's a bill you're particularly interested in and it dies, you can go and find out the cause. Who
Yes.
voted what?
Well, who did? I mean, but that's the way it has been. Whether it will be now,
Who
we don't
knows?
know.
Oh, good Lord. Well, let's talk about the redistricting, bipartisan redistricting. I know that's an issue that you're very interested in. What's going on with that? There was that court case that came out that said at least our congressional districts are unconstitutionally drawn. We've got all of the minorities apparently packed into Bobby Scott's district. So lines have to be withdrawn. Is that going to have any effect on the actual state lines? for
Well,
the state
what's
representatives?
very interesting is in the last few days, there's also been a lawsuit put in against the House of Delegates districts. So that is also under litigation. We'll see where that goes. I have a feeling it has a pretty good shot at having the districts overturned. Now, when we did redistricting, I was chairman of the Senate committee that did redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
We were very careful on making sure that we had the best attorneys letting us know that what we were doing was legal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure the chairman of the House committee, comparable committee, will say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been from the beginning questions about some of those House districts.
Right. So is there an effort down in the General Assembly to deal with this, to come up with some kind of a bipartisan task force? I know for years there have been. I know Senator Creed Deeds was a big
Yes.
advocate at one point of it. Is that going to go anywhere? Is there any effort to do that now that
There
we've got some court impetus to do something?
Yes, it's a very interesting dynamic right now. A number of very important business leaders in Virginia have decided that the only way to really have government functional again is by changing the redistricting. And they have put money into this. They have set up an organization with organizers throughout the state to work on this. They have a website, One Virginia 2021, I believe it's called. And they have legislation they're proposing. They've asked me to put in the bill, the constitutional amendment, putting together a nonpartisan redistricting commission.
Okay.
And I'm really looking forward to this because in the past it was basically viewed as a Democratic effort.
Right. Well, I am surprised that the businesses are jumping into
But the
this.
business community is into this.
So what do from the business perspective, what is the reason that they think that bipartisan redistricting is somehow going to be better for them than this sort of
They
gerrymandering?
think that our government is not functioning properly. They don't like how divided everything is and how rancorous it is. They view that as bad for business.
That's true.
Yes, and I think they're right.
Yes, I do too.
So they're getting involved, and some of them have a long tradition of being involved with kind of good government initiatives. Lee Middleditch, who is heading up the effort, started the Sorensen Institute, for example.
Okay.
He has a decades-long commitment to having well-prepared elected leaders who can work together.
Okay, well, maybe something will happen now that the business community is involved.
I hope so.
Now, you're also very involved in election reform.
Yes.
So
yes.
what's with that?
Well, because I'm the ranking member of the Privileges and Elections Committee, I have a number of bills I'm putting in dealing with election law. I'm trying to get rid of having to have an excuse for in-person absentee voting.
Nice.
That's failed in the past, so I'm also trying to get rid of the requirement that people have to say what their religious reason is for having absentee voting. I think it's none of government's business what religious obligations people have. So I'm somewhat hopeful about that bill.
Well, I think that it's one of those things that if we could get the early absentee voting without an excuse needed. Of course, in Northern Virginia, because one of the excuses is if you're going to be out of your jurisdiction for something like 11 hours or 12 hours, and anybody who works anywhere other than in their home in Northern Virginia would seem to be able to meet that requirement.
That is, and thank you for mentioning that. I think more people should be aware of that and use that. I use it every time.
Oh,
My
absolutely.
district includes Arlington.
Right.
I go and campaign in Arlington.
Exactly. Well, we'll see how it goes this year because it would be nice to have some improvement in how we're handling the elections. And I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know you're getting ready to run on down to Richmond, and we will check in with you during the session to see how things are going. And good luck.
Thank you, Bettina. Thank you.